I am Asim Bandari and I work as a communication officer at SATI. Let me introduce you to your moderator, Dr. Mona Shrestha Adhikari, Chief Executive Officer of Enterprise for Management, Economic Reform and Gender Equality, Emerge, Nepal. We look forward to an engaging discussion and hope this session sparks new ideas and solutions for the development of MSMEs in the region. Now, without further ado, I now hand the floor over to our moderator Dr. Adhikari. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Asim. Good afternoon. This is the last session of the day, so I really want to say good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, that's the spirit. Namaste to everyone, and warm welcome to the last session of the day. It's quite a big task to be moderating and speaking at the last session when everyone is tired and wants to go home. But we know that the topic of this session is so interesting that we might have to take extra 15 minutes. So let me start with some data, as everybody loves data. If we look at the WTO, there's something called the informal MSME group. And the informal MSME group tells us that 95 of the companies in the world are MSMEs. And out of them, what we have is 60% of the world's employment. Coming down to South Asia, what we see is there's nearly 99.6% of the enterprises are MSMEs, and those SMEs are the ones that have around 77% of the workforce and also have data of 34% of their country's GDP. What we also see is, along with the impact of the COVID-19, words like resilience has been the buzzword. We've seen this word come up time and again yesterday and today throughout. What we also know is that every time there occurs any disruptions in the supply chain due to disasters or any crisis, the MSMEs are the ones who are the hardest hit. And within that, what we also know, and we've been hearing it again and again, is that businesses that has been led by women and marginalized communities, they are the ones who are disproportionately affected due to their persistent socioeconomic status and, as we know, the unequal playing field. So what is happening currently is that currently there has been efforts on pivoting to sustainable business models, which is on the rise. And we also see that within what we see the 4 phases of disaster risk management: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. This is something that we have been seeing time and again. Among those 4 phases, business community or the private sector has been seen to be more active on the later 2 phases, which is the response and the recovery. So what happens is we need to ask this question: how are we how can we actually better equip the businesses to move to these first 2 phases of the prevention and the preparedness for any kind of shocks, be it climate-induced disasters or any other kind of shocks? And this is what we will actually be discussing this afternoon with our esteemed panelists here. This session has basically 2 objectives. The first one is to understand the state of play in South Asia on the resilience and the agility of MSMEs, including those that are led by women and or other communities that are marginalized or are in the minority. We have not been hearing much about them, but we hope to get a clearer picture on going a little in depth and wider into MSMEs, but also to understand and discuss what are the role of the different stakeholders in shaping an equitable and inclusive business ecosystem. So let me introduce you to our panelists here. We have a keynote speaker and we have 4 panelists, as you can see in our session, and I take the honor of introducing them briefly to you, also telling you a little bit more about what normally doesn't get published about them or that you do not know. You've seen our SAES website and you can read their bios there. But let me start with our keynote speaker, and we have Mr. Krishna Bahadur Rao, the Secretary of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Supplies. He has worked as the Chief District Officer in 5 districts and has also served as the Head of Disaster Management Division of the Ministry of Home Affairs and other ministries in Nepal. What you may not know about him is he loves traveling. And we have Dr. Ganga Tilakratna here on my side, who's a researcher and the head of policy, poverty and social welfare policy research at the Institute of Policy Studies in Sri Lanka. She also loves traveling, and son papri, which is a sweet made from gram flour. We also have Tripti Rai, who is the country director of Oxfam Nepal. She's a practitioner and a feminist leader. Not many know that she's also a mother to a teenage boy. We have Ms. Mikiko Tanaka, who is the head of UN SCAP's sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia. You've heard, must have heard a lot about her. She's very famous in the region. What you do not perhaps know is that she loves dumplings. And she has been enjoying momo every day in Nepal. If you need more information about dumplings other than the work that she does, please reach out to her. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Shuman Sakya on the extreme side of the table, who we know as someone who works for and with the entrepreneurs. He is also the founder of Tangent Waves, and currently he is investigating how to balance sweet things in life with weight management. So now, with some insider information that is already out to you, I would now like to request Mr. Krishna Bahadur Raut, Secretary, Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Supplies, Nepal, to kindly deliver his keynote speech for the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. Distinguished panelist, moderator of this panel, distinguished participants, good afternoon and namaste. I think we are already tired of, so I'd like to shorten my keynote, but it's not keynote, it's just elaboration of some data which is available with us. Basically, MSMEs are entities that are involved in the production, manufacturing and processing of goods and services, we all know. Nepal's Industrial Enterprise Act 2020 classifies industry into 5 different categories: micro, cottage, small, medium and large. So our discussion today is only of 4 of earlier. Last large industry we are not discussing here. As per the Act, micro and cottage industries are defined with different specific characteristics, but for the small and medium, it is defined in terms of fixed capital investment. MSMEs are a group of firms heterogeneous in size and nature, which when taken together has a significant direct and indirect participation in the national product, as well as in employment absorption and job creation. This sector is considered the backbone of every economy, developing and developed equally, that has contributed substantially to the economic development of every nation. It generates employment opportunities and works in the development of backward and rural areas. MSMEs are also important in terms of equity benefits and distribution of income as well. The importance of MSMEs to long-term economic growth and stability derives from their size and structure, which under adequate conditions allow them the flexibility and ability to confront adverse economic conditions. MSMEs are generally more labor intensive than large firms and therefore have lower capital cost associated with job creation. Consequently, it plays an important role in fostering income stability, growth and employment. The development of MSMEs is also important for poverty alleviation and the promotion of more pluralist societies. According to the data provided by ICSB, formal and informal MSMEs make up over 90% of all firms, which Dr. Mona recently said 95%, and account on average for 70% of total employment and 50% of GDP of the countries. In addition, MSMEs are considered a viable source of income for those looking to venture into the manufacturing industry. In case of Nepal, MSMEs are crucial to the country's economic growth, employing 2.7 million approximately population of the country. Allow me to talk about resilience and agility. We know that resilience refers to ability to withstand and recover from disruptions. Likewise, agility refers to capacity to adapt quickly to market demands, technological changes, and global trends. The concept of resilience has emerged as a vital attribute for MSMEs, enabling them to withstand and adapt to adverse conditions. MSMEs can adopt to enhance their resilience, focusing on 4 key dimensions like strategic, operational, financial, and socio-economic resilience. Most small businesses operating in developed and developing countries tend to rely on personal savings and networks to cope with disasters. In the case of developed countries where special recovery funds and insurance are widely available and accessed, MSMEs lean toward prioritizing or complementing formal coping mechanisms with individual informal ones. In developing countries, informal coping strategies are often not chosen but imposed by the absence of and or insufficiency of formal mechanisms, and that guarantee business owners' own survival as well as that of their business. MSMEs make up almost 50% of South Asia's regional GDP and employ approximately 85% of the labor force on average. According to World Bank, 7 out of every 10 jobs globally are created by MSMEs. According to National Economic Census 2018, Nepal has 920,000 approximately established economic establishments which engaged almost 32 million workforces. Out of them, there are unregistered establishments as well. Registered MSMEs are also challenged by increasing input cost, competition, onerous collateral requirements, lack of suitable technology, and a waning entrepreneurship drive. There are huge financial gaps. Only 35.5% of the MSMEs have access to credit, and only 32.5% of the small enterprises have the opportunity to avail credit as per Nepal National Economic Census 2018. Noting the above, policymakers in this region, where nearly 70% of disruptive natural disasters take place, need to identify policies in different stages of disaster management, from prevention during disaster, recovery and reconstruction for MSMEs to mitigate, respond and recover from natural disasters. Many countries have corresponding funding or subsidizing policies across stages from disaster prevention to disaster recovery. Looking into funding policies, the most common approaches are low interest loans and credit guarantees under different scale. Grants are provided to repair or purchase machineries, equipment, but not loss for compensation. Few countries have provided income subsidies for affected enterprises to pay salaries, with New Zealand and Thailand having offered tax assistance for the affected businesses. Also, public-private collaboration is clearly stated by Australia, though many countries in the region may have cooperation with private organizations. Japan provides business continuity planning (BCP) for MSMEs post-disaster. BCP is critical to ensuring that MSMEs contribute to economic recovery by providing continuity in income generation and employment. Enterprise recovery programs that act in response to various needs of different industries through cash, in-kind, and technical support can help reverse the inherent vulnerability of MSMEs to disasters. For example, the government of Japan provided a capital subsidy known as the group subsidy to help MSMEs recover from the damage caused by the Tohoku earthquake in 2011. Also, Sri Lanka established relief assistance to MSMEs that felt the immediate and longer-term damaging impacts from the 2004 tsunami. In tourism-reliant communities such as Tohoku, Japan, policymakers made a concerted effort to push for long-term recovery of the region by promoting both domestic and international tourism to revitalize the economy. After the 2015 Gorkha earthquake of Nepal, we have also started volunteer program to support earthquake victims for reconstructing personal houses, temporary learning center, reconstruction for resuming teaching learning activities. Likewise, Pokhara Tourism Revival Campaign, We Will Rise Again, We Are Safe, Pokhara is Safe, like slogan was started with the initiatives of tourism entrepreneurs and strongly supported by government agencies. In conclusion, the MSMEs community of this region are as an indispensable part of the growth and development stories, promoting a culture of sustainability among MSMEs and ensuring their financial resilience means supporting sustainable development and reducing the protection gap for vulnerable communities. Therefore, we have to create environment and institution that has fully embedded sustainability into all strategic choices with the aim to create value for all stakeholders while building a more resilient MSMEs. As we know that MSME sector is the growth engine and backbone of economies like Nepal. If we talk about Nepal, the MSME sector engages almost 2.7 million workers, I already mentioned. Women comprises 37% of the total workforce engaged in this sector, with the largest concentration of women as workers in micro enterprises. Almost 27% of women were employed as managers of MSMEs. Therefore, this sector is gendered in nature. Women-led MSMEs play an important role in creating economic opportunities. They also drive female workforce participation in the formal economy across local supply chains. There are several factors that influence women's access, control, and participation, affecting gender parity in the sector. The unregulated sector includes a higher concentration of women-led enterprises and a larger female workforce. The highest proportion of unregistered and unregulated establishments fall in the micro-enterprise sector, which constituted 99.5% of all unregistered MSMEs in 2018 census. This trend disregards the economic contribution of the unregulated sector, rendering its workforce invisible in the policy space. So it is a great question for us to address the MSMEs involvement of women and or marginalized communities. Around 13% of the registered SMEs in Nepal are either fully or partially owned by women. The FWIN, the Federation of Women Entrepreneurs Association of Nepal, estimates that around 15% of women-run businesses have completely collapsed since the pandemic. Likewise, digital divide and financial illiteracy impact access to financial technology. In Nepal, the financial sector's rapid adoption for digital services in banking created an urban-rural divide due to inadequate financial literacy and training among rural populations. This disparity was even more pronounced for rural women compared to their male counterparts. Nepal's MSME sector is inclusive. Women labor force participation is also higher in terms of other sectors. However, there are many challenges to be addressed for enhancing resilience and inclusion. It may be applicable in regional level as well. A working strategy to close digital divide and promote fintech knowledge will go a long way in enhancing financial literacy and inclusion. It will help leverage the advantages of digital finance and e-marketing. A public-private partnership with e-commerce platforms can promote forward and backward linkages without the need for middlemen. This will open up a potential consumer base and unexplored markets as well. Finally, the governments and stakeholders can further aid MSMEs by ensuring access to finance. simplifying regulations and providing training and resources tailored to their unique needs. In conclusion, the resilience and agility of MSMEs associated with a focus on inclusivity are vital to building a sustainable and prosperous economy. By supporting these businesses and providing them with the tools to succeed, we can unlock their full potential and contribute to a more inclusive and resilient regional economy. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That was quite a very good keynote address, I would say, because you started with not just the unpacking of the terminology, but gave us a scan through of what are the developments that have taken place in Nepal and what could be the challenges and what are some of the things that can be done also in the region. So we'll come back to you later on as well as you stay with us throughout the session. We are always time constrained, that is the irony. So let me give you a run through of how we're going to run this session. We have 2 rounds of questions. We are going to have 4 minutes each for each speaker with their questions and the answers. We have a timekeeper there. Ashim is there. He has the 1 minute written. So after your 3 minute finishes and you have 1 minute left, there's going to be a time notice there. And once the round 1 finishes, we go with round 2, and then we'll have about 20-30 minutes for question and answers with the audience here. And I would like to request you all, as the speakers speak, to kindly note your questions. And I say questions so that they have a question mark at the end, not your opinions for time constraint reasons. And then we'll take their question and answers from the panelists, and then we'll quickly wrap up the session. So if I can start with the first round, which is basically on the state of play on MSMEs and the resilience, and also to share some of the good practices, because we often have, we get very drained to only hear about the challenges, and what often gets missed out is the good practices. So let me start with Ganga here. Ganga, so in Sri Lanka, what are the challenges of MSMEs when mitigating the risks, including the climate-induced disasters? And again, when you say that, could you also highlight some of the good practices that the MSMEs are doing in Sri Lanka? And you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mona. Let me actually quickly thank, first of all, Sorty for inviting me for the South Asia Economic Summit. SMEs in Sri Lanka over the years actually have been faced with various climate-induced vulnerabilities like floods and severe droughts, especially what we experienced in the year 2022, affecting several districts of the country. But however, over the last 5 years, I would say MSMEs in Sri Lanka have been impacted by multiple and overlapping vulnerabilities that have gone beyond climate-induced vulnerabilities. For instance, now in 2019, the Easter Sunday bomb attack in Sri Lanka affected had a huge impact on the economy, especially affecting the tourist sector and the tourism-dependent SMEs across several sectors. For instance, the hospitality sector and the retail and handicraft and etc. And we know that in year 2020, the COVID-19 and the lockdown restrictions affected SMEs across the globe, and Sri Lanka was no exception. And more importantly, in 2022, the economic crisis in Sri Lanka significantly disrupted the operations of SMEs across several sectors due to fuel shortages, long daily power cuts, an increase in price of raw material, as well as shortage of imported raw material, and crisis-induced reduction in demand. So basically mitigating these risks, especially these overlapping and multiple disasters, MSMEs in Sri Lanka have faced several challenges. I would quickly highlight a few, given the time constraints. So one of the major constraints was actually the limited access to affordable and flexible financing, which has been a major challenge for MSMEs to invest in more innovative and disaster resilient solutions and to expand their operation. And this was particularly due to the collateral requirements and other stringent conditions by the formal financial sector that have made many SMEs, especially those those led by females who depend, and the more micro enterprises who depend on more informal financial arrangements. And the other challenge was lack of technology adoption by MSMEs due to lack of awareness on digital tools and skills, and also the digital divide in the country, which especially affected the SMEs in rural areas. And inadequate access to knowledge and awareness of risk mitigation strategies by many micro enterprises, and also supply disruptions due to climate-induced disasters, as well as the economic crisis, which led to a shortage of raw material and also inefficiency in delivery of goods and services. And also there were other challenges too, which was actually induced by the economic crisis. For instance, there is a shortage of skilled labor in some of the sectors due to out-migration of workers following the economic crisis, and also high cost of inputs, including the energy cost. So despite these challenges, there are also examples of some of the good practices adopted by many MSMEs in several sectors, especially in terms of digital transformation, diversification of revenue streams, as well as using green and sustainable practices. So there are examples of MSMEs, especially in the retail and food and beverage sectors, that have shifted to e-commerce and also adopting online delivery models using the existing online platforms such as Daraz and Uber Eats, PickMe and Kapruka. There were so many. So that have using them, actually they have been able to sustain their operations during crisis, and also to tap new markets. So these practices also have been able to create new employment opportunities in several sectors. Another example is actually SMEs in the tourism sector. They have diversified some of their offerings or services, basically to attract domestic or the local travelers during the crisis periods by using ecotourism, cultural experiences, as well as using special packages for local travelers. And another example, a best practice example, is actually many farmers also have started to adopting mixed farming practices and drought resilient crops. And also, I can highlight another one, is actually renewable energy adoption, especially solar panels, is another good practice by many MSMEs that have been used, especially to reduce energy cost and to ensure continuity in their operations during power crisis like what we experienced in the year 2022. I hope I'm on time.
Yes,
so.
Thank you, Ganga. Okay, so let's move from Sri Lanka to Nepal. I wouldn't like to summarize what people have said, because I am sure the audience is very alert at this point of the day. So over to Shuman now, and for him I have this question more in the context of South Asia on the state of preparedness of MSMEs. So what is this, the state of preparedness in South Asia, and maybe we would also like to hear some good practices in the region as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. I will share what I have read and found, at least in the South Asian region, and that resonates very clearly with what is happening in Nepal and globally as well. We don't need to go back to the figures as to how and why MSMEs are very, very important. So the current preparedness, when we look at it, whether it is in Nepal or in the region, there is a low risk awareness and preparedness. Most MSMEs in South Asia lacked structured preparedness plan, primarily due to limited resources and awareness. It's mostly because many operate informally. Even our secretary also mentioned that there are so many enterprises which are not registered, and because they are not registered, we really don't know what's happening with them, and which makes them very vulnerable to risks like climate-induced disasters, supply chain disruptions, or economic shocks. The second, which was also mentioned a bit earlier, is the digital divide. While we talk about technology and its adoption, there is a sort of a major lapse in how the urban MSMEs and the rural MSMEs take up, because there is lack of access to technology, Many MSMEs which are there in the rural areas really find it very, very difficult, according to their infrastructure as well as to adapt very quickly. So they do not find that very easy. The third is the MSMEs mostly depend on local market and purely localized supply chain and customer bases, which are highly susceptible to disruptions. So once there is a major challenges that comes in, and we have seen that there is a global data that says that 65% of enterprises, which are MSMEs, run or led by women, close within 1 year of disruptions. So that's huge. You know? So 45% immediately, and another 40% immediately, and another 25% within a year. So that is very, very massive. So there was a study that was done in January 2024 in Nepal by the National Business Initiative, where they conducted a survey, not just not for the MSMEs, but for the larger organizations, bigger organizations in Nepal, where they found that what it revealed was 79.7% of the companies do not have a structured disaster plan. They do not have a BCP. 79, almost 80%. And the interesting thing is, these companies have suffered a disaster at least, 88% of them have suffered a disaster at least once. So even after they have suffered a disaster, they have not done it. The bigger companies in Nepal have not done it. MSMEs are a long way off, I believe. Moving on to the good practices that you talked about, I found that in India, there is a government initiative which is called the Resilient MSME Scheme, which is aimed to build capacity for disaster preparedness, offering financial incentives and training. Maybe that's something that maybe we can all look at in South Asia. I believe there's a arrangement in Sri Lanka, which is called the cluster-based approach, where the garment sector uses industrial clusters that shares resources and recovery plans, enabling collective resilience during crises. So then in Nepal, we had an example of technology adoption. During COVID, Tulo.com, with support from Emerge, helped many MSMEs transition online so that it can enhance their market reach and create more business continuity. In Bangladesh, I believe there are programs which has been there for a long time, mostly focused on building and on access to finance for MSMEs, enhancing their resilience to economic and environmental shocks. And beyond South Asia, personally what I've been following and learning a lot is from Philippines, where the private initiative PDRF, which is the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, have amazing resources, and they've worked very closely with MSMEs, and now they also have initiative for nano enterprises, as they call it. Somebody who's pulling a cart only, somebody who's doing a day job. So they have something called the SICAP, SICAP, Synergizing Recovery Initiative Knowledge and Adaptation Practices, which helps MSMEs build resources on disaster preparedness and business continuity planning. So that's what I found, and I felt this is something good to share. Over to you, Dr. Mona.
Thank you. Big round of applause to our speakers, to also encourage them, but to also let us know that you all are awake and listening to us. So thank you very much. That was very interesting to hear the round of good practices that has been taking place in the region, but also beyond. Let me move on to Mikiko. And since we've been touching upon, since the session started, on the gap in terms of digital and going and basically linking to e-commerce platforms, UNSCAP has done a brilliant job, and we know that it has played a key role in supporting the women-led MSMEs in South Asia and beyond to better equip themselves to address the disruptions in the supply chain, primarily during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Mikiko, we would love to hear what has been the impact of your engagement with these MSMEs thus far. Over to you.
Thank you. So I'm sharing a story that actually a few people in the room know better than me, actually. So SCAP and the sub-regional office in New Delhi that I'm part of, actually had a project with the enhanced integrated framework of the WTO under the leadership of Dr. Ratnakar Adhikari, who is also in the room here. And with my predecessor, Nagesh Kumar, who is somewhere in the hall, and Rajan Ratna, who's probably very famous, more than me here. Those are kind of three fathers. I haven't heard of who the mother is, but anyway, three fathers of this project. And this project was, I think, conceived in 2019 or something, right? And it was basically to train women entrepreneurs in e-commerce, digital marketing. And when it was starting, of course, COVID hits. And, everybody was challenged on how do you deliver programs. And that was, not the exception for this project as well. But, very quickly, the colleagues who were engaged in this were, started delivering the online training of this e-commerce. And we also partnered with the South Asia Women Development Forum, Shakila's here, to really reach out to women entrepreneurs who will be interested in this, who can benefit from this. And then I think it was in 2022, finally, that the first face-to-face training was possible. And I understand Shuman was, yeah, you were part of that too, right? So everybody's kind of, knows more than me. But I think just to draw, again, impact, I don't know if it's impact or it's one of the results that came out was that at that particular moment of COVID where, everybody was obviously, suffering here, but businesses also were hit, right, because of the lockdowns. And this e-commerce was actually a saving grace for many of the women entrepreneurs who participated. So although the design wasn't necessarily, to cater for this COVID crisis, but in the end it did help. And I think everybody learned through this that e-commerce can be a very, useful way for women businesses to operate. Because many of them are at home and often difficult to, get out into the market. But also in the case of this COVID, it was really a business saver, a lifeline saver for many. So how that was applied was probably the learning of it. And then I think the other part, which is interesting, is that it was South Asia, right? So again, we can only cover a handful of women entrepreneurs in any country, but that network that was created, and I should say in terms of methodology, there was a training, but there was also some hand-holding afterwards. All the women entrepreneurs who participated in the training were on a Facebook platform, exchanging experience, and there was a kind of a mentor who was also advising at every step in time. The training environment was quite safe too. The online tool was actually to set up your own business on a platform that was not online yet, but it was a practice, right? So it gave that safety of and confidence building to women, which I think is a very important part, regardless of the the environment that it was in. But in the end, in terms of that agility to adapt to these kinds of difficult, shocks, it also contributed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mikiko, and I have also been part of this this event as well because there was many things that we did simultaneously, and this going e-commerce was the in thing at that point in time, not just for those MSMEs but also us as consumers, because we were all learning how to get our hands on those e-commerce platforms, trying to get the materials that we want. And one of the things that I wanted to also raise here as the discussion goes on is also to bring in the factor of inclusive businesses, because we talk about MSMEs, but we are all aware that we cannot put them all into one box. And within MSMEs, as our secretary said, we have those that are registered, but we also have those that are unregistered. And within that also, we have the MSMEs, particularly the micro ones, who are actually the ones who are also led by women, who are those that led by rural communities, also led by people with various disabilities. So I think these factors often get missed out in the discussion, and I would also like everybody to keep that in mind as the discussion goes on. Let me move forward to Tripti, who is the last speaker of this round at the moment. And at Oxfam, Nepal, we know that they have a program which is called the Enterprise Development Program. So in this program, what they have is also something called Promoting Climate Response Enterprises. We would love to hear more about it, Tripti, and if you could also share some of the good practices there. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mona, and thank you for having Oxfam and me in the panel as well. I'd just like to actually put this in the bigger context, because the session previously to this is sort of in my mind. With Oxfam, we begin with a lens of really looking at how do we address the inequalities and social injustices that exist and that are posing barriers to many marginalized communities, women, children, Dalit communities in Nepal. So that's basically where we start. So the Enterprise Development Program sits within that framework, where one of the key components that we work on is economic justice, along with looking at climate justice. So how we approach this is really try to identify in the most vulnerable, marginalized, unreached regions. For example, we are currently working in Sudur Paschim and also a very unreached location in Nepal, and we are trying to work with local communities there to help them with their enterprise building. So the Enterprise Development Program itself is a multi-country program where it is like an impact investment, where we try to identify these existing enterprises that need support and help them grow their businesses. We also look at how we can support them in their operations expansion, how we can help with the business planning, also with access to financing, because I heard our previous esteemed panels also talk about the lack of access to financing for many of these enterprises. So for example, some good practices we see that has had incredible impact. For example, in Bangladesh, we are working with fish hatchery and duck hatchery, so women have easy access to affordable fish larvae, for example, to invest in fishery, or also have ducklings so they can have their own small enterprises. And alongside also in Nepal, we've worked with local communities, smallholder farmers to help with seeds enterprises. So I think these are some really good initiatives that are ongoing. Now, looking at the changing context, etc., we're also working with communities. Previously, we've supported, for example, honey beekeeping, looking at climate resilience as well. And as we go on, we also keep learning. So we're also looking at how we can incubate new business in climate resilient, for example, irrigation, working with farmers, or even looking at climate resilient water sanitation enterprises, which I feel are still work in progress, but where we'd like to learn and also support and work with other organizations. So these are some of the key initiatives that we are currently doing with the Enterprise Development Program.
A big round of applause to Tripti as well. Now that we all have some kind of an idea on the state of play on the MSMEs, their state of resilience, the agility, and in some way on the inclusive businesses, let's move on to the second round, which we will follow in a similar manner, 4 minutes each with some questions, and then we can open the floor for discussion. So the second round, let's take some of these initiatives and actions to scale up policies and practices that will enable these MSMEs basically to thrive, to grow, and to compete in the market both locally and globally. Let me start with Mikiko. So Mikiko, in your experience, how have these MSMEs, been able to better equip themselves to address such kind of crisis or disasters? And how is UNSCAP planning to engage with them in the future? Over to you.
Yeah, so the approach of this particular project was through a network of women business associations. The only criteria we had was that that person had to have a laptop, because that was the medium of training, right? But, in terms of, most of those women entrepreneurs had some business going on, first of all, right? E-commerce was kind of a new way of maybe expanding their business, and in the case of COVID, kind of saving their business, right? I think it's one intervention in many, and I don't think we can kind of claim any kind of credit around what the impact is. It's very difficult to measure even too. There were about almost 2,000 women who were trained in this, went through this, but they are also getting other support too, or maybe not, you know? And I think for SCAP, from a perspective of this e-commerce, we do have a regional institution called the Asia Pacific Center for ICT. It's based in Incheon. And they have developed actually a whole package of e-commerce, not just e-commerce, digital, women's digital, capacities and businesses. And what we are doing with that, and you can find that online too in terms of the information, we're looking for institutions in Asia Pacific actually, who can be trained, who can roll out this training more, you know, kind of wider and also systematically. There's a limit to how one institution like even SCAP to actually deliver this kind of thing. It does need to be anchored in an ecosystem of a country, of a government, that can sustain it. I think sustainability is always a big question mark and challenge for projects, right? Development projects, whatever it is. But institutionalizing these things is very important. So at least we have this package that my colleagues in Incheon are collaborating with, again, women business associations. We're looking for training institutes actually in different countries because they have the personnel and the resources often to actually continue that. So that's something that we are going on with. I think in terms of MSME, yeah, I mean, I think my first development project back 30 years ago was actually small enterprise support in Thailand, right? I don't think the fundamentals are different, actually, of what was needed then, what the environment is then, and what it is today. And women always kind of disadvantaged in many ways. I think that still needs to continue. And I think we do need to connect the dots better too, meaning that there's a lot of activity going on. Obviously, government policies and programs are important, but that's not all. I mean, all kinds of experiences also accumulated by all kinds of MSMEs, and including women as well, that somehow need to be capitalized to do that. So how do you connect the dots for the learning? How do you create networks or communities that can support each other? I think I don't know, kind of a very fundamental question in this MSME informal sector, formal sector is that across the world, in the developing countries in particular, this formalization is really difficult to do, right? And I think it is also the environment, the governance, maybe it's the social norms and things of that nature too, but it's really difficult. Social protection policies, have talked about this. How do you support, informal sector? For ages. So I think that effort still needs to continue. It's still an SDG gap. We just have to make it better, but there is an intersectionality that you need better governance, you need the gender equality, you need the business environment to be, more level playing field. I think you just have to keep on doing it, but hopefully by connecting dots and more collaboration, we'll be able to do that better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mikiko. I think what you touched upon, something that I would like to also highlight here is this concept of the partnership as well. As you said, one organization cannot do much, and we keep hearing it from those on the ground that some organization comes, does this piece of work in a short span of time, wants the results, and then they go away. But what I think is, Mikiko has been saying, and I would say the others need to, join hands in this, is once an organization is there and there are others that have added value to it, more effort needs to be concentrated to make and reach a greater impact. And one of the things that interests me in this project, Mikiko, if I may add to it, is I remember an occasion, and this was online, and this is very interesting, is where these women in that online platform were suddenly trading with each other. Initially, what we were thinking was these women are the ones who are sellers and the buyers are somewhere else, that somewhere else was there in the room. I mean, that room was a virtual room. But then they were literally trading with each other. And I remember this case from a woman in Bhutan and a woman in India, where the Bhutanese woman was producing essential oils, and this woman in India needed those essential oils to be able to produce the hygienic products that she produces for cleaning, etc. And they were literally trading each other. So I think that has been a good example that I just wanted to highlight here. Let's move on to some of the research that has also been done in terms of the policies and the enabling environment for these kind of MSMEs to be able to be resilient and agile. So moving over to Ganga, could you maybe share some light on it?
Yeah, so I think to enable MSMEs in Sri Lanka to, well, I would actually talk from Sri Lankan point of view, compete in the global market and to adapt to future shocks. Several measures are needed, especially starting from strengthening access to finance and access to technology markets, as well as building capacity. So various measures have already been taken by the government to some extent, like in order to improve access to finance. There is national credit guarantee schemes and small enterprise development funds to provide financial assistance to MSMEs, and also to build capacity and training, the vocational training centers and the national apprentice development program, also working on these things. And also, as my colleague earlier mentioned, we also have this cluster-based approach, which is also linked to one of the main poverty alleviation programs called the Samurdhi program, where I mean, basically the approach is you sharing the resources and sharing the infrastructure and everything. And these programs are largely sort of the focus is on females because they are the members of or the recipients or the beneficiaries of these poverty alleviation programs. So they have been actually used, especially in certain industries like choir industries and the handicraft manufacturing business and all that. And also the Expert Development Board has taken several initiatives basically to improve MSMEs access to markets, especially through technical assistance and capacity building, especially sort of to help them to sort of move into global markets as well. So despite these measures, you know, there are various areas that needs further improvement, and there's much more to be done. There are a lot of gaps. So I mean, given the time constraint, I won't be able to do much, but then I'll touch on three areas. So one thing is actually increase access to affordable finance. So there is definitely need for further expansion to access to finance through diverse mechanisms, including subsidized loans and equity investment and climate insurance, etc. And also there is a need to sort of simplify the loan processes and stringent conditions of formal financial institutions, and also to strengthen the microfinance sector, especially to cater to the financial needs of the micro enterprises, including micro enterprises led by females and more marginalized communities. And also there is a need for financial literacy programs to educate MSMEs and especially those led by the marginalized communities on financial management and strategic investment planning and etc. So another area that I want to talk about is promoting technology adoption. So I think there is a need for government to provide incentives to facilitate MSMEs adopting technology, and also collaborating with tech companies to offer affordable technological solutions to MSMEs. And promoting digital literacy is also very important. And encourage MSMEs to sort of use e-commerce platforms and etc. And also, I think in terms of improving access to markets, so, especially streamlining export processes through digitization and automation to enhance efficiency and reduce export delays are important. And also, I think certain things are already happening, but facilitate trade exhibitions and trade fairs, and also mechanisms to encourage, as I said earlier, MSMEs to use e-commerce platforms to reach global markets are some other measures that needs to be improved. So with this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ganga. I want to elaborate more on that. Let me move quickly to Tripti. And we've heard that at Oxfam you have this enterprise program which is called the Climate Responsive Enterprises. In that program, Tripti, what are some of those must-have policies, for the government of Nepal to be direct? And do you have any call for actions in mind? Over to you.
Okay. So thank you for that question. I think with changing climate and of course the environment, it's very difficult, as we all know, isn't it? And the changes and the impacts of climate, as we have been hearing so many people talk about, really has a greater brunt on communities, marginalized communities, small businesses, etc. So one of the key things, at least for Oxfam, and perhaps this can be addressed through policies as well, we're trying to work with different kinds of insurance companies, partner with them, looking at climate modelers to innovate context-specific climate risk insurance. Perhaps those could be things can be enabled by policy environment. We also talked about, again, in the panel already, about the need for access to financing. So far we see that lending practices are predominantly collateral based. So the lack of, asset means that small businesses cannot get loans. So perhaps that's an area that is quite crucial for sustainability as well, long-term, investments, and also for women as well as small businesses to take the risk, because risk taking is, I think, a quality in terms of growing your businesses, and that's important to create those safety nets and those accesses. I would also really think that it's important, as we are trying to enable and engage more women as well as communities who come from marginalized, backgrounds. We need to be embedding GESI analysis in, how we set up these businesses, also helping with the operations. I also feel it's very important to have workplace safeguarding policies, for example. And the more we think of, engaging in economic empowerment for women, I feel it's important that we understand the care work and care economy. Because how do we create that space for women, for example, to engage in trade fairs, when you have to do a lot of the other care work as well? So how do we create an ecosystem that enables business-friendly environment for women-led businesses would be some things that really come to mind, and I hope we can find solutions together towards more inclusive businesses.
Tripti, big round of applause to Tripti. I don't want the audience to sleep, so forgive me for that. But let's go to Suman for the last round of questions, and then we'll come to you. So please keep your questions ready, and also keep in mind who the question you want to direct to. For Suman, we have this last question, and the question is, how can MSMEs better mitigate the risks, including the climate-induced disasters, and what is required in terms of policy, practice, and which stakeholder in the ecosystem can make significant contribution in this regard? This is a very broad question, but I know you will be able to capture the answer in 4 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you for the questions. I would say questions because I saw some 6 questions there in 4 minutes to answer. So when we look at MSMEs from their lens, what we see is we do not see a business plan when they do their enterprises. So when they do not have a business plan, how can they become disaster resilient? And they would not even have heard about a BCP. Or a business continuity plan. So that, I feel, is a major bottleneck that we need to work in. So maybe strategies to look into could be within it disaster resilient infrastructure. So if you work on that, you'll look into how to make your area of work safe, a better business environment as we are looking at it. So that is something that is required. The other could be on diversified supply chain. Where you partner just not with one, but several others. You try to find out, as we said, that the input costs are rising. So one of the good ways to do it is to mitigate that and see if there are others who are able to support that. We spoke about access to finance, so we need to have insurance and financial safety net as to how do we do that. You know, people think it is a cost, but we have heard that whatever we invest in becoming disaster resilient, if you put in $1, there's a study done by multiple organizations which says that you'll save at least $7 to $14 if you invest $1. So that is something that we need to make people aware of, and how do we do that? The other is to adopt sustainable practices, make people aware that you need to implement eco-friendly operations which could reduce vulnerability to climate-related disruptions. And as we move forward, we need to leverage digital tools. How do we educate them in the first place? We have our language barriers. It is not just in English that we are looking at. Regional language could be different. So how do we address that would be something that we need to look into. For the policies and practices, I'm not an expert on that, but I feel that as I was sharing with our bankers friends over lunch also, that when you give out a loan, you know, it should not be given out just because you have a beautiful Excel sheet where you show a projection and you have collaterals to back up. But do you have a business resilience plan as well? Yeah, so is that something that as a policy which NRB or Ministry of Industry can start to initiate so that they become much more resilient as we move along? It may be baby steps in the beginning. Suddenly everything will not happen. But if once you make people aware, maybe those things will come in. The other I feel is capacity building of not MSMEs, but individuals in the government and other business advisory services, where they need to be aware and create that customer user's journey, as in the IT sector we talk about, as to what are the pains of these MSMEs and how can we mitigate them. I think that customer user journey, as we call it, needs to be mapped out so that then the services can be provided. We always say that MSMEs, we need to make it easy, we need to make it easier, lesser number of bureaucratic hurdles, but what are they? Yeah, I think that those things need to be identified. And in South Asia, especially in Nepal and other countries, we do not have access to data. While information may be there, it might be assumptions, but we need to have or make decisions based on data. So can we make data-driven decisions as we move along? So in terms of key stakeholders, we have the government, where if they can set at least few policy setups in motion, which helps fiscal incentives to MSMEs, that will be great, you know, for resilience investment. So I think that is something that we can start right off. I don't think we need to change many things to do that. For development agencies, I think in Nepal, they're active, but they need to facilitate funding and technical expertise. So both are required. How do we do that? We need to figure out collectively, maybe create a co-creation workshop processes and see what can be done. From the private sector, I feel that the larger private sector, which we talk about CSR or corporate social responsibility, has not been addressed so much. Can there be a provision where we can, or the private sector can, who provides money for disaster response, can also be done for preparedness as well, so that that money can be utilized for MSMEs preparation and so on and so forth. And civil society organizations, I think that advocacy needs to continue to make sure that MSMEs need to be nurtured, need to be safeguarded, because they are the growth engine, as we call them. Over to you, Dr. Mona.
Thank you. So big round of applause to all our panelists. And then the show is on you now, to our esteemed audience here. So let's take 3-4 questions. Please identify yourself and put up your question, and also mention who the question is for. So we have 2 hands here, and then 1 here, and then 1 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we take 6 questions. So maybe we start with you here.
Namaste, everyone. I'm Menuka Karki. I'm an economist, researcher, and a visiting faculty at Kathmandu University. I was thinking of a research topic myself, and I think it really aligns with that research question. So I was recently in a very, not so far from Kathmandu, around 20 kilometers from here, in Sankharapur municipality, rural municipality, I think. And there I heard a saying which is very popular among us, is that there is the budget reaches to those who have access, but not to those who need it. And so I actually was thinking, can we challenge this? So could there be a governance mechanism, or is it rather than focusing, bigger infrastructural development may need time, may need bigger budget, but can there be any governance mechanism, any changes, small changes in working procedure, or small changes in policy that can make a better, can make a enabling environment for MSMEs? And so, since our Secretary Sir is also here, so I think the panelists can also request.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Menikaji. We move on to the two questions here on my left.
Namaste. I am Ravi Shankar Sainjo, former civil servant, and presently I am the vice chairman of this SATI. I'm not, it's not a coincidence, but just I want to highlight some of the, examples from the, Nepal side, isn't it? So I was just remembering, after the severe earthquake we had in 2015, 1972, USA provided duty-free to quota-free for the 77 product for Nepal, isn't it? That was just to, facilitate the poor people who are victims of the earthquake at that time. And they thought that, once, they could, through the SMEs, they could, provide benefit to the victim people. That was the measure. Because when the public hearing was going on in Washington, I was there. And I was hearing all these things, why they are promulgated all these acts and all, and they provided these facilities for the 10 years. And what I found that after here, just I was going through the data, isn't it? Whatever, USA imported in that 77 product, Nepal here is less than 0.05%. Just imagine it. So we could not, our SMEs could not access to that market. So two things actually. They could not most of the SMEs do not have information about the market. That is one part. Second part, some people, they have information, they could not have access to that market. That is another part. And third part is, most of them do not have capacity to produce that product, according to their standard they need. That is another part. And fourth part is definitely the access to the finance. That is very lacking here. And Ms. Ganga has already highlighted these four things. I was just hearing. So opportunity, creating a market, and information about the market is one part. Access to that market, system to access that market is the second part. Capacity development of this SME is the third part, and access to the finance is the fourth part. This should be, government should manage, or even the organization should manage all these things in not the isolation. It should be in the package, one package, isn't it?
Oh,
then only they could, benefit. So after that, after that happened, I tried to coordinate, contact with some of the NGOs here, SME Association here in Nepal, and try to convince for the collaborations and all these activities. But they could not do. They are not much interested on these issues, isn't it? So that is the problem we are facing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Raviji. Shyamji behind. Yeah.
Namaste, this is Shyam. My question is related to, specific to the Nepal. Basically, last September, we faced a big flood in Kathmandu itself, not the rural areas. And we lost a lot of businesses, particularly the vegetable markets nearby the river bank in Bagmati. But whose fault was that? Is it the government, local government, who provided the permission to having that market over the bank of the river where the flooding is every year it's coming, or it's the entrepreneurs who decided to take that risk and then continues, still is there, and or the we civil society that we are not able to educate or aware them about the consequences of these things. So whenever we are discussing about this resilience and agility of MSMG, is there scope of our work or not? How we address these small issues rather than talking about the regional or international or the global issues, but there are small issues there, and we are still silent. We don't know how much was lost due to that flood to the Kathmandu businesses, or what was the worth total we have lost during that flood, something like that. Yeah. So how we can capture that sort of incident as a lesson learned and contribute to the our policy reform or some guidelines.
Thank you. Well noted. We have one question there behind, and one and two more here. So can you take the mic really behind to get this one?
Thank you very much. I'm Sharad Tuladar from NME Bank in Nepal, and my question is specifically, I would like to give a background. Probably the perspective I give could be limited as a financial partner, but based on my understanding or experience I've faced so far with SME and MSME businesses, the environment that we see is, what I would say is we need to identify true SMEs. Because when I say, I'll give you an example. When we talk about when there is an announcement of subsidy financing available, then there would be big businesses trying to find ways to get into subsidy, availing those small loans to just get subsidy out of it. We talk about women entrepreneurs, and there are businesses that are registered in the name of women, but it is run by men. And when we see disruptions, whether it's natural or some other reasons, and then MSMEs are one of the businesses that would be hit hard. But there is a flip side to it as well. People would take advantage of the disruption that has happened, the disaster that has happened, and make use of that in saying that my business is in loss. And then there are international partners that we see, probably Oxfam, and there are other international donors probably who would cater and provide grants to the country, and there is a small pocket of development that happens, or it caters to a limited women entrepreneurs or women SME businesses in country. But when we look at a larger picture, probably we had this provincial structure to see that there is a good amount of development in these provincial structures in the country. And why isn't that happening? I think the government, the policymakers are one big stakeholders in this, and whatever disparity or anomalies that I pointed out, probably someone needs to take care of that, and that could probably bring about a more impactful or country-level change in MSMEs. It could be in Nepal and in South Asia as well. So are we discussing this or not? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. One question there, and then two in the front.
I also echo with just I heard from Nepalese bank is that during the COVID time, government has allocated fund for the SMEs, but bankers are more interested to provide those funds to the small entity which are linked with the large enterprises. So there is a stereotype mindset among the businessmen there. However, that is not my question here. I like to actually, after hearing the discussion, I found that there are at least 4 kinds of MSMEs we are actually talking to. One group is actually the subsistence nature, those who are there. Another is the interim or the transition phase from the subsistence. Another is transition to commercial entity, and finally the commercial one. So I don't think that these 4 categories of enterprise have the same kinds of solution or the same kinds of financial or the fiscal packages to work with. So that we have to keep in mind. So that is first point. And the second point here is that regarding the graduation, often we heard that there are various kinds of programs undertaken. Just we heard about the UNSCAP, very successful intervention. I like to know that after this 4 or 5 years of intervention, how many enterprises under those online-based operations have been graduated from micro to small or small to medium, because that graduation is very, very important. Just we heard that within a year, 67% of the SMEs are dropped out, and the period of their in the job are less than 1 year in LDCs, I heard. So that is another important point to look at. And my final point here is that often SMEs are outside the loop of formal value chains, and they are not getting chance to take part in the supply chains, and those supply chains are largely controlled by large enterprises from the raw material production to the distribution. So they have the whole supply chain in control. I'm not aware about other countries that very much in Bangladesh, and their SMEs are almost non-existent in those supply chains. So how to break those cycles and ensure taking part of the SMEs in those important supply chains? Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions in the front, and then we'll move on to the responses. Tikaji?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Tika Dahal. I'm working with the Women with Disabilities Organization. I would like to share some of the challenges facing by women with disabilities as MSEs and as formal informal sector, especially the informal sector they are belonging. Actually, our organization have done the rapid assessment through online during COVID, post-COVID as well. You know, there were 160 women with disabilities were responded. Among them, 70% said difficult to run the business, and among them, 48.75% closed their business. You know, that is the situation. And then as they often face a lack of trust and support when trying to establish and run business, still the people and our government and the other institutions, they are not trusting their capability. And as a productive citizen, that is a huge problem. And even those who start small business, struggling to earn sufficient income to sustain themselves. It is always problem. Many times we are pushing and trying to support them and linking to the government facilities and other private sector, but it's still just like tokenism, and then just like what is that? Not as a business group, just के भन्छ नि त्यो दया like PT thing, you know, that is the problem. So I would strongly raise that issues. It is important to address as most vulnerable group and need to support them, work together. That is the thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tikaji. Salim, the last question.
Thank you. A very exciting discussion. But I thought that since Mona was very worried about whether people are falling asleep, so let's challenge the organizers, you know, so that they are a bit shaken. So I think I would have been happier if the organizers actually changed the title and actually put the whole thing into the real context. Because I don't think MSMEs should be there. It should be MSEs, because that two M's are not the same, micro and medium. That's why I'm asking the question. So there are serious definitional issues. When you put micro and small with medium, and in the context of Bangladesh, we have seen their problems are very different. And when you actually declare a package for MSMEs, mostly these are captured by the medium enterprises. So I think this is something I have serious reservation, and I just want to flag this issue. Second thing, I thought that there is in the context of Bangladesh, what we have found, and Ghulam Muazzam, he also mentioned that during COVID, what we have found that government declared stimulus package, but these micro and small enterprises, they are not able to actually take it.
And there are many challenges, not only the financing issue, but there are also issues related to their formalizations. Now, how do you really identify them? There are not, many of them are not really registered. The problem is when you get them into the registration process, then this whole taxation and other things, come out. So I think there is a kind of need to have a clarity on these things and how not only the taxation, but other policy frameworks within the country, they become favorable to micro and small enterprises. And you can, in Bangladesh, we can also add cottage into it. It's a cottage, micro and small enterprises. Third thing I'd really like to, and also I just want to mention, citing the experience of Bangladesh, during COVID, and we extended until end of 2022 or early 2023, SANEM conducted 7 rounds of quarterly survey of 500 enterprises in Bangladesh, and almost half of them were small and micro enterprises and medium enterprises too. So we found that very interestingly, where the larger firms and even the medium firms, they were making relatively much speedier recovery, but these cottage and small enterprises and micro enterprises, they are seriously lagging. So I think even when you have shock, economic shock, they are felt very differently, and that's what I really am glad that the panelists, they actually shared their experience. So this is the kind of my reflection, but I have a question for Dr. Ganga Tilakaratne of Sri Lanka. You worked quite a lot on the social protection, Samurdhi, and related programs. So do you think that in these social protection programs, and many of them you also highlighted that they are also targeted small and micro enterprises, how did that, what is the kind of uptake or the kind of a response from this, SMEs, or if we say that especially with these social protection programs, or my question is that whether these protection programs actually help these SMEs to grow, in the context of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Too many questions, I would say, but really interesting ones. I say too many because it's basically, covering a range of issues. We had 6 questions, and if I may quickly go to each of the panelists to maybe take up some of the questions as per their interests, and then we move on to our respected secretary to maybe take more of the questions, because many of them are related to governance and government of Nepal. So if I can start with Suman on the right.
I don't see a question directed to me, even the 7 of them that was put forward. But just to share my thoughts on some of them, Sarji mentioned about how you need to maybe overhaul or take a relook, which our friend from Bangladesh also said, that maybe we need to redefine what SME means and how do you tackle them, because most often than not, you encounter MSMEs, and especially enterprises led by women or managed by women, are mostly on the informal sector. And as soon as you provide them with any facility or incentives, they need to come into the formal sector, they need to register. So once you need to ask them to register, it just does not work. And they are deprived of the stimulus packages that does not come in. I think that is a major issue, I feel, which needs to be addressed very strongly. So I feel that was one that I could take up. On what Shyamji said, I'm also waiting for the answer as to who is responsible, whose fault it is with the September flood or the flash flood that took place. I'll leave that my comments here and allow other panelists to take up.
Thank you. Mikiko, would you like to take any of the questions?
Yeah. There's no one size fits all, right? I think there are some principles that are important in development. When I first studied development, it was about participation, empowerment, of really the people, right? And so I think some of those basics, I think, are very relevant for governance as well. I mean, I don't think it's an overnight shift that, if you look at the history of any given country, how what's the relationship between citizens and government, which level? I mean, there are all kinds of complexity, but you have to start with where you are. So I think that, for me, the simplest kind of, extraction out of it is really this kind of principle of subsidiarity, and you use that in decentralization as well. If people can take care of themselves, or if, villages or communities can take care of themselves, let them take care of themselves. The parts that they need support or they need some kind of assistance, you go one step higher, or you go one step higher. But you really need to start where the people are and what is possible for them to do it. For that, inclusion is absolutely necessary. It's not a top-down decision on, this is what you need and this is what you do. People will just react to what the incentives are and what they need to survive. I mean, that interesting question around graduation, I don't think there's really a graduation. I mean, people who seek a job in a company, they're not really looking at graduation. They're looking at, okay, they have different motivations. I've seen in some countries, these, cottage industries or whatever, some people don't want to get above a certain threshold of income. Because once they exceed that, they attract attention. There's rent seekers. There's, corrupt government officials that come and get money. So they want to keep below the visibility. So you never know what that incentive is, but important is for the people to know what it is. And then I think, going back to leave no one behind, there are those who are disadvantaged by, nature of who they were born, what kind of family they were born into, community, whatever. There, yes, public sector needs to intervene. And last issue on the development agencies. I mean, there have been development projects for decades, right? If that is still sought as the role to get financing, I think we're missing an opportunity. The development assistance needs to be a kind of a transforming catalyst. If you don't use it that way, when the money runs out, your business as usual.
Thank you, Mikiko. Maybe I come to Triti and then Ganga at the end.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to reflect on what the colleague from the bank mentioned, and I think that's a huge challenge because, and I think that's not just the bank challenge. Broadly in Nepal, we see that we could have many good policies, we could have many good, instruments, but it's not often reaching those who are actually supposed to benefit from it. So how do we really work towards making these accessible, really accessible, very much at the local level or where we want to target? So I think that's an issue around access, and the more we talk about it, perhaps we can find more solutions together. And as we were reflecting, I was just thinking as well, building an enterprise, working, whether it's small, micro, medium, large, I also personally feel that it's about entrepreneurship. So when we start these kind of initiatives, do we also have to think about helping people build the skills around entrepreneurship? I don't think it's something that just naturally comes to everybody. I feel it's a mindset, it's a skill. So how do we make that accessible, again, inclusive to everyone who wants to, be in that sector? So I think that's a very important step, perhaps, that I feel I want to share with everybody.
Oops. Have they closed it? No. Okay, maybe Ganga, in the dark, you can tell us where research could lead us to, and take up Salim's question at the end. Thank you. Light is there for you.
Okay, research. Okay. So I think what I want to say is also in terms of research, public.
The question that Salim actually had, yeah.
Yeah. So Salim's question was about social protection and SME. So, so actually, how it happened in Sri Lanka was that even though I fully agree, SMEs, so medium and even sometimes the smaller ones are actually quite different. We have to differentiate them out, from micro enterprises. So in Sri Lanka, under the main poverty alleviation program called Samurdhi, so it was more for like an integrated program where the social protection or the cash transfer program was there, but also it was linked to it's a small country, so about 1,040 microfinance banks which are actually linked at the national level. So some of the banking societies. So and also there was a livelihood component too in the social protection program. So the recipients of the cash transfers, they were also the members of the societies that operate at the village level, who had access to loans from the microfinance banks. in those divisions, and also who had access to livelihood programs. So not everyone, I mean, they could actually access training and all that, but then not everyone got support from livelihood support program. So you need to have some sort of a business plan or some sort of a plan. Even they are more sort of micro enterprises, or could be like little more than micro enterprises, maybe 10, 15 together, kind of. So it was kind of an integrated approach. So I think, so in terms of take-up, so I think take-up was, you know, it was kind of encouraged. But there were issues, obviously, with sustainability of certain programs. So now, actually, through that same the program set up, some of these cluster-based programs have been kind of initiated with the support of some development partners, actually ADB and all that, to have sort of cluster-based programs in certain areas related to coir manufacturing, coir industry. So basically including the members of those societies, including the members of those social protection programs. So the sort of business development services related to these businesses were actually supported through the same program.
Thank you. Thank you, Ganga. And we have our respected secretary who has been so patiently listening to all of us and making his notes so diligently. May I request Mr. Secretary to maybe share some of your observations and also maybe able to address some of the questions?
Thank you. I have not jot down some points only. Actually, I became enlightened from the discussions by the panelists and also questions from the floor also. And many queries have answers there. Already there is answers with the questions as well, and some important answers will be coming in the days to come. I think it's not final in this room, and many questions already answered by our distinguished panelists as well. So this discussion is very important for the growth and the resilience of micro, small and medium enterprises in South Asian region because of the backbone of the economy. If this sector is become weaker, then the overall economy will not be resilient. So there is one common, I think, takeaway message, maybe developing resilient economy is to create resilient MSMEs as well. So I think from this whole discussion, this is one of the main takeaway maybe. And one of the issue raised by Bangladeshi friend, the medium enterprises should be wiped out from this. So not MSME, MSEs only. Yeah, maybe the medium is a little bit well established, and all opportunities will be taken up by these medium enterprises. That is actually a real scenario in countries like ours. So there is elite capturing in MSME sector. So the program should be clearly targeted to micro, small and medium only, cottage only. But few programs should address for the medium. So we can deal with MSMEs jointly if the targeting will be properly and the implementation will be properly, that problem will be addressed. And one issue raised by our Kathmandu University colleague, invest in MSMEs enabling environment, and the case of Sankharapur municipality. Basically, this is the local issue. In new structure of the federal structure of Nepal, basically large industries will taken up by the federal government and Department of Industry. And small, medium cottage industries will be regulated by provincial government, and also micro and small cottage industries also registered and regulated by local government as well. So the three tiers of government should be involved in this whole process of MSM, basically micro, cottage and small industries. In our case, there is one MCSM, basically micro, cottage, small and medium. We have four categories there, but in international term we call it MSMEs only. So in past there were so many programs from the central government, like MedApp from the support of UNDP, and before MedApp there were government have so many programs like entrepreneurship development, skill training, technology adoption, and we have all district level medium cottage industry offices also, including in the central level there was MSME board also, committee also. But after the adoption of the new federal structure, the whole structure is transferred to the provincial level, and in the central level we have only MSME promotion center. So it was earlier, it was the MSME department, and this center is looking after some national level activities like technology transfer, etc. And now the MedApp program is renamed as MEDPA, and it is transferred to the local government, but it is more than 102 crore rupees is transferred from Ministry of Industry Commerce to the 753 municipalities, but the resource is very meager. So there is resource crunch in the MSME investment and promotion. That is real issue, and you raise the real issue. The development is not only the construction of the roads, rural roads, etc., but how to focus the local politician and local policy makers to invest in MSMEs. It is became a paramount or big question for us as well. And for the utilization of the opportunity, actually we have to target properly, and the subsidy program has launched by many governments, like local government, provincial government and federal government as well. So like from Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Supplies, we have 100 crore startup credit program. This year we are implementing, and last year we have also implemented it. And another small and medium industries, technology adoption, technology transfer, skill development program were implemented, and this year also we are going to implement, but the subsidy or credit facility is only absorbed by the enlightened or elite MSMEs only. The unregistered are not capable to harmonize or harvest this kind of facilities as well. So how to capture this unregistered micro enterprises? This is one of the real phenomenon in our context, and if we can address these micro enterprises which are not registered, that will be the mainstreaming or inclusion of the all types of people who are engaged in MSME sector. So for this perspective, we have Nepal government has going to implement new MSME policy. We have recently come up with a startup policy 6 months ago, and the new MSME policy is going to be approved by the cabinet. We have already submitted to the cabinet, and maybe within 1 month it will be implemented. And we have to focus on other many areas like incubation services and one of the question was raised here, graduation of micro or small enterprises. The rate of graduation is very low. Like in the past, the MEDPA program had created many micro enterprises in all over the country, but rate of graduation is very low. So how to engage the all entrepreneurs in the rural areas and thrive their business? It is a very, very pertinent issue for us. So in that part, we have one subject related committee which comprise the ministers of the federal government and provincial government, and also mayors of the local bodies. We are regularly discussing such kind of issue and going to harmonize the policies and programs in all 3 tiers of government. So with this approach, I think this will be addressed properly. And the other takeaways, maybe there are going on many initiatives from the government, central government, provincial government and local government, but maybe some like Triptiji has said, Oxfam is implementing enterprise program, many other CSOs are implementing such kind of programs. So these programs should be integrated and harmonized so as to create synergy, and that will be more beneficial for thriving the MSME sector. But currently we are feeling it is operating in silos. So this kind of silos should be addressed so that it will be more resilient and the agility will be higher. And the supporting MSME supporting institutions should be further strengthened in terms of the federal system of governance, because we have already dismantled the centralized system. So how to coordinate and collaborate with 3 tiers of government along with the CSOs and the business community. So this kind of institution should be strengthened. If the institution is better off, then the MSMEs will be, I think, more thriving, and that will be the in no one left behind approach, and they will be in the supply chain of the large and medium industries, and the export amount will be higher from this MSME sector. And finally, the technology adoption rate of the MSMEs should be enhanced, because currently the adoption rate is very low, and many programs have purchased technology and handed over them, but they are not utilizing it. So the adoption rate and utilization rate should be enhanced. And the digital technology, finally, now it's ICT age. So the industry 4.0, 5.0 concept should be also, I think, inbuilt or inculcate on the MSME sector and their entrepreneurs and their business managers, so that they can easily access on the customer side, raw material side, and the middleman cost will be reduced and the business will be flourished. I think these may be some of the takeaways from this discussion. And one of the most important issue, we have to create culture of production and productivity. Now our society is not on that direction. We are becoming consumption based society, so that that is the most important challenge for us, especially in Nepal, maybe not in Bangladesh and India, because they have the huge amount of production and productivity, and export is very high, but our trade deficit is very high because of the low production and productivity and high cost of transportation, and the competitiveness of the product is very low. So these issues are very important, so as to address the sustainability and agility of MSMEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Big round of applause. You have very well captured the essence of this lively session. I don't want to get into the details of what has been discussed. What I capture from this discussion this afternoon, let me put it in the form of 5 C's. So the first C that I see is there is a need for consultation, communication with the MSMEs. That has to be an ongoing process, going from not just the macro level, but to the micro level. The second is to conduct research, collect data that can be used for data-driven decisions. The third C is on capacity building, which is for the MSMEs, but also to other stakeholders in the ecosystem, including the government and others. The fourth is to be able to contribute to foster resilient and agile businesses, moving more towards what we see as resilient, agile, green, you just name it, but those kind of business models. And the fifth is for collaboration of good practices that can support the MSMEs in this green transition. So with these 5 C's, I think we've come to a very good, productive session this afternoon. Each of us in this room, I would say, have a role to play, to build and to foster resilient and agile MSMEs. So I would like to urge you all to do our bit, if not to ourselves, for the next generation, for them to be able to live in a better environment. So with that, I would like to request all of you to please give a big round of applause to our respected secretary, our fabulous speakers, Mikiko, Tripti, Suman, and Ganga, and to each one of you also being so resilient and staying till 6 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you all.